Good morning and good afternoon to you all. I am Sam David, welcoming you for this webinar on behalf of Marga Systems. Today's webinar is titled SalesForce AppCloud, a Primer, and will be presented by Gayatri Vishwanathan and by Srinivasan Bhaktavachalam. Before we get started, I want to share a couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded and the replay video will be shared with everyone who had registered for this event. And the second one is, if you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to open the questions section on the GoToWebinar panel, and you can post your questions there. And our panelists will answer your questions. However, your phone lines will be muted throughout this webinar. Right, I would like to hand it over to the presenters. Over to you, Gayatri.
Thank you, Sam. So, hi everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to join us. I am Gayatri Vishwanathan, popularly called Guy. I head technology in Marga. I started off with Lotus Notes as my primary area that I was interested in, and over the last few years, I've kind of expanded onto multiple platforms, inclusive of Microsoft SharePoint, Java-based framework, and SalesForce. I'm also an avid runner and a cook. Over to you, Srini.
So I am Srinivasan. So I am a technical specialist at Marga. So I have been specialized on Lotus Notes and SalesForce. So I like to hear music and enjoy in my free time. So that's short description about it.
Thanks, Srini. So what are we discussing today? The expectation is you guys all come from a Lotus background and have heard of SalesForce either within the organization or out. And the key idea is to kind of present the SalesForce AppCloud in the context of Lotus Domino, which we've all used as an app development platform, right? I mean, while IBM probably, when they built it, didn't think of it as so much of an app development platform, it ended up being one. And this is more like a primer for those who have used Domino as an app development platform. So we will look through the user interface, look through programming, look through security aspects, and also some integration aspects of Domino and SalesForce today. So before we start, let's get a quick poll.
Right, I would encourage everyone to participate in this poll. And the question here is SalesForce currently or likely to be an integral part of your organization's IT landscape? The options are yes, no, or maybe. Most of the participants have participated in the poll. Waiting for a few others. Right, let me close the poll and I'll share the results with you.
Okay, good. So looks like a lot of people either already have SalesForce or at least considering it. So hopefully for all of you who have joined us, this would give you an introduction to what you're getting into and what is possible with this platform. So just to give you an intro, I mean, there are so many different aspects that people discuss. There's Sales Cloud, there's Marketing Cloud, there's Service Cloud, and there's Heroku. Now let's understand what are these different things, right? And what are we interested in? So the Sales Cloud is primarily the entire CRM, which can be specific, customized, and run for a specific organization. And the marketing similarly does it for marketing areas, and Service Cloud, of course, helps in customer service aspects. But what we are keen on at this time is the SalesForce AppCloud. Now, what is the AppCloud? It's a platform. It's a platform as a service. Now, one of the things that's happening significantly in the world around us is the fact that a lot of changes that has happened because of the digital momentum, because of the need for mobile applications, because of the need for business applications, there's a sudden need for business users. They are asking for more and more business-specific applications that can, precisely handle what they want it to do. And one of the key things that Salesforce does pretty well is to provide a very scalable PaaS platform where you could build applications that are very simple, just focused on delivering a business value, to being pretty complex, integrating with multiple enterprise-grade systems and things like that. So today's webinar, all the comparisons and all the discussions we are doing is with respect to the SalesForce AppCloud. So let's do a comparison. I mean, is it the same? Is it different? How is it different? What are the key areas we want to focus on? So one of the critical things that happened with Domino is primarily the Domino application platform is on-premise, right? The email calendaring platform today is available as IBM Smart Cloud. It is available as on-prem. You can actually host it as well on your own private cloud. Any of those are available. But if you really look at the application server, today you don't have it as an IBM Smart Cloud. I mean, in the sense, it's not the same comparative multi-tenanted cloud offering like what a SalesForce AppCloud is. Domino did start off as an email and calendaring platform, so it's kind of innate to it. And more importantly, the Domino app server need to be maintained. I mean, you need to have administrators who kind of watch over it, make sure your agent managers don't crash, your HTTP task doesn't lose all the memory and things like that, right? You have a job for the administrators in the Domino platform. When you look at the Salesforce aspect of it, it's a multi-tenanted cloud. So it's not specific to you, and it has a certain background to it. The fact that Salesforce really cares for the platform a lot, so they're not really going to allow you to write applications that can mess with their platform. So they care about the platform really a lot, and we'll see some of that aspect down the line. That it doesn't inherently have email or calendaring capabilities. It does integrate with Microsoft Office 365, it does integrate with Google, but it does not inherently or innately have email or calendaring. And the difference is when you call someone a Salesforce administrator, they are not doing equivalent of what a Domino administrator was doing. The administrator in Salesforce world is a more business savvy person, a person who's kind of focused on pulling together different aspects of Salesforce to provide solutions to the different units inside an organization. So it's a more business savvy role than a technically or a server focused role. So we all know how a Notes application kind of gets built out, right? I mean, you typically start off at the organization or the domain level. You have your servers, you have your certificates at that level. Then you build out your applications. It could have one database NSF file, it could have multiple NSFs. They all come together to deliver the functionality. And inside the databases, you actually have your forms, your views, your code, your pages, you have your agents, you have all of these coming together to actually build out the functionality. And most importantly, from a data perspective, the Notes database has always been a NoSQL database. And you have unstructured data. Unstructured, not so much in a way like, there's no structure to it, but it was all governed by the fields that were there in a document. And you could really change the fields that were there in the document on the fly, and it's something that was always possible in Domino. When you look at the App Cloud itself, Now again, the structure is a little similar because you have an organization and you do drive all your apps from an organization, and then unlike driving it from forms and documents, you actually have things called objects. Now objects that can be defined more at a global level or specific to an app level, but it's all around objects and interaction of objects and manipulation of objects. And though from a outside perspective, Salesforce looks like it's a record basis, but really it's actually relational. It's fairly relational underneath. And so when we get a requirement in Lotus Notes, how do we start? We kind of understand the business requirement, and then we kind of put together, is this going to be a client application? Is this going to be a web application? Does it need mobility involved? A whole bunch of thought processes around that. And that's how we start creating or envisaging the entire application. So one of the key parts to an application is its UI. And inside Lotus Notes, it was, if you had built a traditional client application, it was all governed using your forms, your views, which are kind of consolidation of multiple documents in a particular way, and then you could export things into Excel, make out reports, or even construct dashboards out of views. You had pages that kind of structured how your information should be seen by the user. And now, over the last few years, you also have the ability to use X pages to build pretty good modern UI to Domino data. You could use JavaScript frameworks to kind of create a good-looking UI, a web-based UI to backend Lotus Notes data. And of course, mobility has become a byword today in any app. So one of the things that Domino offers is for you to build your own mobile app. I mean, you could use Bootstrap, you could use different frameworks there. You could use tools that can make a Domino mobile app, but you still have to build it. It's not as if an application that you've built is automatically accessible through a mobile client. When you look at the app cloud, really, you start off with objects. Once you do similarly, just like you would start off with a form, unlike Domino, here you start off with objects. You kind of understand what is the business requirement. You look at, are these requirements, do they need new objects to be constructed? Are they already there? Can I make use of existing objects that are there in Salesforce? How can I best put them together to kind of serve the business need I want? Now, by default, Salesforce gives you and if I create a new object, it pretty much immediately gives me a default layout, it gives me CRUD operations, but I don't have to stop there. I can go ahead and customize, and whether there's existing objects, which by almost always you would customize to your needs, but you can also choose not to use them at all and build your own custom objects. You also get a set of standard fields which you could choose to use or you could choose to hide. And from a UI perspective, you can choose to not use the default layout at all, though it gives. So, which means with a click of a button, I could build an application very, very quickly. But if I want a kind of rich visual interface, I could put together a very good-looking interface using a combination of SalesForce pages. And recently, about 2 years back, you have the Lightning experience, which is a very mobile-specific experience that you get with SalesForce AppCloud, which allows for mobile applications to be built pretty quickly. Once we do the UI and once you kind of set out the how your application should look and feel, then you obviously get into building the functionality on it, right? And if you take a common functionality in most Notes applications, and by no means is this exhaustive, but it's just a very common set of functionality, you would see that there are typical CRUD operations. You have forms that are being created, modified, edited, and you look for the audit trails and things like that. You could have workflows or actions that are performed on these forms. You have automated processes. And in Lotus parlance, we typically call them agents, which are either scheduled or which are based on, like, when someone clicks a button, you have these automated set of functionality that happens. It could be consolidating some data, it could be like, updating a particular field, any of these, right? Or it could be pulling data together to kind of create a report, any of these. Of course, there's always like, reporting on top of the notes data that gets collected. You see them in many different views. You see them as like, a series of sortable options inside views. Or of course, you can always export them and to create your own reports. And in any data entry, you have your validations and things like that. Now, looking at the programming language, when we build our notes applications, primarily the business logic was built using formula language, Lotus script, or Java. Increasingly today, you can use JavaScript for the front-end manipulations as well. And when you're using X pages, it's primarily like, Java in the backend. And that's how we used to build all our application logic. When you look at SalesForce, a lot of the functionality that we would build code for, most organizations, when we have been working with Lotus Notes for quite some time, had our own set of script libraries that were kind of reused and things like that. But as a platform, SalesForce gives quite a lot of functionality default. It's already there. So you could build your functionality either using workflow rules. Workflow rules are those like where you set up based on a particular value change or an object has been changed in a particular way, and then you could act on a set of series of actions on top of that. A visual workflow could, kind of construct something similar to what our dialog boxes used to do, right? You can actually let someone, let's say a person who's doing customer service, and he wants to understand what's next, and you could build something like that with using visual workflow and SalesForce. You have a coding language called Apex Code, and using which you can construct fairly complex functionality along with integrations with other platforms and things like that. You also have a process builder, which is more aimed at an if-else kind of a mode. So it's a series of if-else. If this, then do this, else do this. And then you could build out a series of actions inclusive of calling, say, a scheduled code or calling a complex piece of like Apex code. You could do any of these. It's just a construction of fairly sequential pieces of business logic. So now that we've seen how we build the UI and how we build the business logic, and we'll just take a quick look at, we will go into the actual SalesForce sandbox to show you some of this. But as I said, the workflow rules is based on an object. You set up a criteria, and then you can have actions against it, something that can be done immediately after the object changes or based on a particular criteria. Like I could say, 2 days later, send out this email. It's something that is possible. And we will look at some of these as part of the demo as well. Apart from the workflow rules, you also have an ability to set out approval processes where you say, based on this particular submit action, here are what you need to do. A, step 1, do this, like maybe make sure that this particular document or this particular record is not editable anymore. B, then you make this change to a particular field value. C, you could enable an email alert to be sent. Any of these. So again, but the key difference between a workflow process and an approval process, workflow rule and an approval process, is the fact that you need an approver. There is a clear, I have approved or I have rejected state in this, and that's how an approval process works. So when you come to approval processes, automatic question is, how does it handle security? We are used to Lotus Notes having a fairly stringent security, starting all the way from, access to the server, and then access to the actual application using the database access control list. And then, of course, you can go down to the level of, a form or a view or basically any design element. You could control access to those. You could have a document level access control where you have your readers and authors fields, which kind of fine grain whether a particular document can be viewed by someone or edited by someone. And it goes all the way down to an individual field. You could hide it, which is not really, you're not controlling the access, but you can at least make sure people don't see it. Or you could encrypt wherein specific values can be hidden from people who don't have access, who are not supposed to have access. Now, is this similar? Do we get this kind of fine-grained security in Salesforce? Yes, because in Salesforce, it really starts off at the level of, do I have a license to access my organization? And so it's similar to, do I have access to my server? So at the organization level, it's the license. And after that, it starts off with, you could set accesses, very fine-grained accesses to the application itself, or to specific objects in the application, specific tabs in terms of the UI. You could specifically set up access control at each record level. So, and finally, also at each field level, right? Here's how a profile looks. Again, we will see it in more detail during the demo, but the key thing here to notice is there is a standard profile that is available, and by and large, you would customize it because your needs in your organization are different. But you could also build your own custom profiles, which kind of provide fine-grained access to the specific data that someone can access. Someone can, use, someone can modify, someone can, which application that they are allowed to work with. All of these get set up and manipulated using profiles. So let's just go over to Srini. Srini, off to you, and he will walk you through a few samples. We talked about how Lotus Notes and Salesforce are similar yet different. So over to you, Srini.
Thanks, Gayatri. So basically, in Lotus Notes, building an application, we would follow a few basic steps. Building an application. First would be we create some forms, and then based on the requirements, we just make this form as document or response to response documents, and then finally add few fields, and then finally set the events to this field. Third one, we would create some, after creating these forms, we would create some views to show all the documents in that view. Along with this, we provide some code operations. So this is what we do it in Lotus Notes. When we come to Salesforce, it is totally evolving around the term called objects. So objects in Salesforce are nothing but a table-like structure. For better understanding, we can also compare them to a spreadsheet where each columns would be referred to as fields in Salesforce, and then each row you can be comparing to as records in Salesforce. This is how you can compare it with a spreadsheet. So basically, there are two types of objects that you get. One is the standard objects, and other one would be the customized objects. Standard objects it already provided along with the Salesforce, and custom object is whatever the custom objects that you are about to create, and you can create it for a specific requirement alone. So that is how it is. So coming to this standard object, when you create a standard object, there are particularly few things that's created automatically for you. For example, you get a standard field and a user interface, and then some of the code operations. So now looking at the standard fields, as Gayatri mentioned, we get few of the standard fields created by, last modified by. So this is some audit trail functionality that we use to create in Lotus Notes. So this get automatically created for us. Then the next session would be we'd be adding some new fields or the custom fields that we would mention some of the data type for it. So this is custom fields that we need to create for this object if you want to add any fields for this. And then next would be the page layout that I was talking about, the UI that Salesforce provides you by default. So when I open this, so this is how it is. So you can customize the position of each field from here. or just like drag and drop the fields if you want, or if you want to remove it, you can just again drag and put it back. And then you can also like provide the mandatory fields, like for example you can just make them as required or like read only from here. So this is how like basically you can change the UI of the standard page in Salesforce. And then to also be provided with some basic code operations like edit, delete and other stuff. So this is all like basically you will be provided when you create a custom object, you will be provided with all this stuff. So now let us look at the UI, like basic UI, how it is like providing. So this is how the normal page layout that looks like. So when I open a record from here, so this is the basic page layout that we are talking about. This is how it looks like if you are looking at a standard Salesforce page, and this is how it looks like. So if you are not like really interested in this UI, you can really customize it to as we required by using like Visualforce page. So now you take a Visualforce page and would like to design the same thing in a Visualforce page. This is how it would be looking like. So you can also like pull in all the frameworks, responsive frameworks to construct your UI, and then you can use your Apex coding and the controllers to like build in to map in with the objects. So that is how you can like modify it, and this is the extent you can modify your objects like using this Visualforce page and the standard form. So once you are like ready with this UI, the second thing that we would start on is like business logic, like whatever like Gayatri said, we will be starting a business logic. So one of the main thing is like in Lotus Notes we use this Lotus script and add formula to achieve all the functionalities, whereas in Salesforce you have like something pre-built for you called like workflow rules and then approval process. Coming to this workflow rules, this is used to automate some of the workflow actions in Salesforce. Basically, like what would be defined in this workflow rules is like we'll be defining an object for which the workflow rules should work. Then we will like mention which under which criteria and what is the action that needs to be performed under this. And we can also make this action as like immediate or after some time. So now like let me take an example. Let us assume that I have an object called like travel request for which I need to send an approval mail to the owner of the record if the status has been changed to approved. So this is how the travel request workflow looks like. So when you look at this, I have mapped the object to a travel request form and set up my so let me go from the beginning. So this is how the place where you like configure all your workflow rules. Under the workflow approval, under the create, you have a workflow rules. So once I click create, first I'll be mapping my object to it, and now once the object is mapped, you next need to maintain the evaluation criteria. Since my scenario is like I need to check every time, I need to check the condition every time when the status has been changed to approved. I just make my evaluation criteria as created, and anytime it is edited to subsequently meet criteria. And then I'll set the status field. This is the field that comes from that is like used to store the status in travel request form. So I'll just select that field, and then when it is equal to approved, I just wanted to make this workflow rule to be active. So once I set this, I can go and set the actions for this rule. So for example, when this criteria is met, I just wanted to send an email alert to the owner of the record. So I go there and select my email alert. So this is how it looks once you like set up all the emails. So what is the basic thing you will be mentioning here is that who is the recipient who is going to receive this mail, and then an email template for it. This email template you can also like customize it. For example, let me like open it. So this is what is the email template like I have configured for this travel request. So if when you see this is the object that I have mapped, and this is the field that I have mapped to it. For example, when I look this email, it will be saying like hello, who has like created the record. So that is how it is like configured. So basically this underscore C is nothing but all the custom objects that you create will be like appended with underscore C. So that is how the naming term here it is. So the object is travel request, and then I have mapped a field to it called like created by. So this is how like I'll be mapping the email template along with who is the recipient going to receive it. So once I set it, I just activate this rule. So now when I look at this, every time when the record status changes to approve, the owner of the record will be receiving a email alert on this. So this is how the workflow rules is like maintained in it. So now next thing I would like to move on is like approval process, that next level of approval process. So approval process is almost similar to a workflow rule, but in addition we have an approver overlay. When a criteria is made, to whom the request must go for approval. So that is what we would be configuring it here. So what we will be defining it here is like what we'll first select the object for which the approval needs to be defined, and then select the criteria followed by the approver and action that needs to be performed on each stage. So this is what we'll be defining in the approval process. So first thing we will be like selecting the managed. You can just go to this approval process from like create, workflow approvals, and then approval process. You can just select the objects for which you want to select the approval process, and then click on like create. Standard setup is that. So you'll be pushed to this type of UI. Just let me open it. So you'll be just selecting some process name. Let me keep it as test. So before setting a rule, let us like take a small example. Like let us assume that the let us take an approval process for a travel request. So all the travel requests must go for an approver selected by the requester at the time of submission. So this is my scenario right now. So what I'll be doing is like I'll be keeping this entry criteria as empty, because my every record needs to be going for approval. My every record should go for an approval. So I just keep it as empty over here, and this is how it looks like when you normally create it. You just create a process name and then make the entry criteria as empty. So and then define this process. So this is the process definition for it. And now like once this is like once this process has been done, you need to like make the approval process. For example, now once the record has been submitted, so now next level of thing will be like for whom it should go for an approval. So that is how we will be configuring it here. So when I open this or edit this, I'll be basically setting that. So my scenario is that the end user should like select this approver manually. So I'll just select the scenarios, like let the submitter choose the approver manually and then saving it. So that is how like I configure my approval step. So this is the basic step, like configuring an approval process. So this is how you will like configure it. And to like detailedly understand like what it is exactly configured, you can also like look into this view diagram, which provides a basic understanding. Like so once the record has been submitted, the record gets locked and then it goes for an approver. So once it is approved, once the final person like approves it, the record is again locked it, and you cannot do further actions on it. So others, if it is rejected, the record is like unblocked and you can like edit some fields in it. So this is the basic like thing that approval process is done. So that's the basic thing about like approval process. And then so once all this like workflow is like matched, and then you have a basic workflow going on, thing that you would be like going to deep is like security. You would like to add like securities to this application. So let us like compare like few securities that has been provided in Lotus Notes and how can we map it in SalesForce. So first thing would be like database level securities. In Lotus Notes, the database level securities is achieved via like access control list, where we define which user has what level of access to the database. Similarly, in SalesForce, we have like profiler, where we can define this profile like can access which apps, tabs, objects, and fields. So this is like similar to like in like how we have in access control list in Lotus Notes. We can also like make the same thing with profiler in SalesForce. And then coming to this document or record level securities, in Lotus Notes, the document level securities can be achieved through like readers or authors fields, where in SalesForce record level access which user can see which data is like restricted with the help of like sharing settings. And then coming to the field level of securities, in Lotus Notes you use like normal events to hide all those fields, and the same can be done with the help of like same events in Salesforce through like profilers. Like you can just mention like which profile wants like which access, which fields to be like visible. So that level of access you can provide it through the profiler. So now like let us move into this, what is this profiler and a detailed view on it. So this is how a profiler would look like. So I have just opened a profiler, standard employee profiler. So before moving into profiler, the basic idea of this profiler is to like set up permissions. It is like a set of permissions that can be assigned to end users. Like a user can have only one profiler, and you can assign a profiler to multiple users. So this is basically used to group those users who have similar permissions, so that when you add or remove a permissions to a profile, all the users assigned with this profile will automatically get the update. So that is the basic purpose of like using a profiler. And by using this profiler, you can change the app settings. For example, like if I want to want this profiler to be like visible, I want to like make this app visible for this profile, I can just tick this visible box or other stuff. So basically you can just set the app settings to, from this profiler, and then you can also like make or assign like which tab to be viewed for this profile. And also like you have like some administrative permissions and then general user permissions. And then coming to the standard object and custom object, you can also like set for this profile what level of access they have to an object. For example, let us take an example. Like I have like two users, like HR user and then a salesperson, and I have like few HR app and then sales app. So I'll be creating two profiles, making it as HR profile and then sales profiles, and I'll be providing the apps with sales profiles to only sales. Like I'll be assigning the applications of sales only to the sales profiles, and then the application that is related to HR to the HR profile, so that only this HR profile users will be able to see only the HR app, and the salespersons will be able to see only the sales app. So that is the level of control you can have from the objects profiler. So once this profiler is like created, you can automatically assign this profilers to each user that you have like grouped it. So that is what it is basically used for. So next would be like sharing settings. So again, coming to the sharing settings. So coming to the sharing settings, this is used to manage whether the owner will like share the data with others or not. There are like two types of sharing settings is available. One is like organization wide, and other one would be like sharing tools. So what does this sharing organization wide like provide is like you can make an object like private or public. So making an object, for example, let me edit this. So making a object private or public, what happens is like when you make an object private, it will be visible only to the users and only to the owner of the record, and the other persons will not be able to see the records. So now like when you make it public, all the records, like whoever may be creating it, will be visible to all the other users around it. So let us take a scenario now like I have created a record and my manager needs to like see it, but I have made this let us take a scenario. So I am a salesperson and I have like other salesperson also besides me. So whatever the sales that I do, the other person should not be able to do, but my manager should be able to do. So at this time, what I will do, I'll make the sales object private so that the other person will not be able to do, and then grant this access using hierarchy so that my managers will be able to see this record. So this is how like you can assign the securities to this through sharing settings. So that's it like from my end, and this is how like basically you create an application, build an application from there.
Thanks, Srini. Thanks for just walking us through. And as you see, like now it's not as if we've kind of covered all aspects of building an application with Salesforce. It's an entry level, so to speak, for you to kind of be able to map how you would build your notes application and how something similar can be done, or how does it map with Salesforce. One thing that I would encourage anyone who is interested in working with Salesforce is you can sign up for the developer account and there are something called trailheads. Now, trailheads are very specific training programs with videos, and it's almost gamified set of training programs. So when you pick each trail and then you walk through each of those exercises, you can get a fairly good understanding of the basics. Now, obviously, like, when you have to build more complex applications and create, real enterprise level functionality, it starts becoming better only when you use it more and more. Just like how it was when you started probably building your applications with Lotus. Okay, so let's do a quick poll.
Right, here comes the second poll of the day. What are the ways in which your Lotus Notes application landscape works with Salesforce? And the options are no overlap, tightly integrated, migrating to Salesforce, or any other. Almost 50% of the people have voted so far. Right. Here are the results.
Okay. I do see that there are people who say there's no overlap, while there are people who are also saying there's a migrating skill. We'll talk a little bit about integration as well as migration in the next few minutes. Right? So one thing is, it is possible to integrate Domino and Salesforce. Right? It could be a different level, at a level of just authentication. And some organizations have, Domino as your primary. It serves as your LDAP, it serves as your directory, and I have seen organizations where even the entire organization hierarchy is built using the names.nsf. And in that case, you really don't want to. And if you're planning to continue your usage of Domino, you don't really want to recreate everything. It is possible to integrate at that level. Salesforce does provide. It actually becomes both a provider and a consumer. So it allows you to single sign on with Salesforce, and it allows you to do that through 3 different mechanisms. So one is using SAML, which is kind of becoming a very common way of authentication across in the web world. You could use the old-fashioned LDAP, wherein you have a delegated authentication, right? Before logging into Salesforce, Salesforce really calls your web service in Domino, checks whether you have authenticated, whether you're authorized, and based on that, it actually allows you access into Salesforce. A little old-fashioned. I don't think it's being recommended too much today, these days. It also allows for integration using OpenID. The reverse is also possible. I mean, I haven't personally seen anyone want to do this at this point in time, which is if you want your Domino users, instead of being authenticated or validated against your names.nsf, but to be actually done against your Salesforce, it is possible, technically possible to implement it. But much more common scenarios is where you want your app, whether it's your Domino application that wants to pick data from Salesforce, or whether your Salesforce application that needs to integrate data from Domino. Both of them are possible, primarily because of the ability to use REST APIs. I mean, it's becoming more and more common to use REST APIs, but from a support perspective, REST and SOAP APIs are supported. And pretty newly, there's something called streaming APIs, which kind of literally, when there's a change that happens in Salesforce, you could get to know about it. I've seen that happening more. I mean, one of the scenarios that you can see is, let's say you build an application saying using Node.js on the mean stack, but part of the data comes from Domino, part of the data comes from Salesforce, and you want to put everything together. Maybe it's a D3 report. And you could host that, for example, on Heroku, which is your platform where you could scale your application pretty easily. But then, because you have these API integrations with both Domino and with Salesforce, you could build a fairly rich application using these APIs. The third, of course, is you're not doing any functionality level integration. You're not calling any methods. You're not calling any functionality, but you just want to probably pull data from A to B or B to A, and especially from Domino to Salesforce. So you do have ability to use things like bulk APIs, which allow for a set of records to be updated at the same time. So multiple different options that are available for integration. What we do see is that typically REST APIs are preferred, keeping up with the way the new digital technologies are emerging. But when you look at migration, what are the options? How do we go about doing that? So the methodology that we've seen working pretty well is extract out based on what is the functionality that you have in your Notes application. Extract out the design, extract out the forms and what exactly you want to achieve, and very quickly put together a navigable wireframe, right? I mean, typically in Marga we use AngularJS or React, creating a very usable interface which reflects the business user's needs. And it's clickable, so obviously you can walk through it and get the feedback from the end user very quickly, and then map the data, because one of the key things with Salesforce is there are limits. As I said earlier, Salesforce cares for its platform a lot more than it cares for your app. So there are a lot of limits, like how many custom objects can you create, how many each object, how many fields can it have, how many at any point in time, how many Apex code scheduled, like equivalent of schedule agents, let's say, how many can you run, and each of your code, how many objects can it touch or how many records can it update. So there are limits in a lot of these places, right? And unless you write, it is possible to write very crappy code here as well. But if you do, then you can't really move them into production, because some of these limits will come into play and then stop you from doing those. So one of the important things that we need to do is to map the data and look for global objects that have already been created. I mean, some of these have been defined. Let's say, for example, I have a definition, I have a standard set of lookups I need to do. These are all read-only. I don't necessarily have to create configurations in each application. I centralize them, right? I used to do that in Notes applications as well. If I had planned for it well enough, I could do the same here. And so that you need to map those objects. If you have a specific need, then you kind of define the app-specific objects, what you need and how those lookups need to work, and then create those. On top of that, you do the actual functionality development using many different options. You could have reusable Apex code in your organization. You could use your process builder, or there are third-party packages. If you go to Salesforce Exchange, there are a lot of pre-built functionality that is available that you could subsume and use within your applications. And finally, if necessary, you do your custom development. The key thing is also to kind of migrate a sample set of data, not everything, and this now becomes an application to which you can get feedback, where the users get a real feel of the application. Are they able to achieve what they want to achieve? And from this, once you have gotten your feedback, you've made any fixes, then you can look at how much data do you really need to extract from Notes. Like for example, you could, let's say a travel request application you've migrated. Do you really need to bring in your closed travel request? May not be, as long as I can archive it or take a report out of it, and that can be stored. I might only want to move all those open requests in the appropriate level, or I could say I only want to move open requests that are in draft, has never been approved before. Any of these, right? You can have these criteria-based movements and using APIs, and then you also have to migrate your data level access, because You don't want your readers and authors fields to fail. You need to make sure that they are also brought over. So that kind of brings in a way of working with Salesforce. So let's do a quick third poll.
Right. Here comes the third poll. What is your biggest challenge in adopting Salesforce applications? And the options are: default UI doesn't create a wow, challenges in meeting complex user requirements, licensing and budget constraints, or any other. Okay. More than 60% of the people have voted so far. A few more seconds for others. And here are the reasons.
Okay. I can see that primarily there are challenges in meeting complex user requirements as one of the critical responses from all of you. So one of the things that I would like to leave you with is, just like any other platform, Salesforce also needs work, and it needs planning. And much more importantly, again, I think I'm repeating it, but because it's the truth, they care about the platform a lot more than your app. So it needs effort in ensuring that your application fits in with the landscape. B, you use the right tool for the right job, and you have a lot of different tools available, like just like this, right? For a simple workflow, you could use the process builder, you can use the workflow rules, or you could use the approval processes. Being able to pick the right tool for the right job. And finally, how do you manage your integrations? Because though we today talked only about Domino and Salesforce, I'm sure when you look at larger organizations, you have your integration with your ERP, it might be integration with your line of business solutions, things like that. How do you do that, and how do you plan for it? These become important when you're going to build your complex applications.
If you have more questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. You can reach us at sales@margasystems.com or at gayatri@margasystems.com. Right. Thank you for joining in today. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.